Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the latest in our ongoing series of active aging convening. I'm David Elcott, along with Stuart Himmelfarb. We co-founded the Active Aging Network to change the conversation about aging in Jewish life and to make it easier for Jewish professionals and volunteers to meet and share vital information as we explore ways to engage or re-engage Jews in Jewish and civic life as they move through life stage that extends from the end of middle life careers into older age and eventually retirement and beyond. I want to really encourage you to take advantage of what we have available at this Active Aging network in terms of the prior conversations that have taken place, in which there is so much we can learn about what represents really 50% of the Jewish population of the United States, a population that is on the whole vital, healthy, wealthy enough to be able to support initiatives, and truly desiring something more in life than simply, old age and old age homes like it used to be perhaps 30, 40, 50 years ago. We've had wonderful speakers dealing with the medical issues, dealing with longevity issues, dealing with things like downsizing. Our speakers today fit the objectives of the Active Aging convenings. They're truly changing the conversation about Jewish life and aging and leading discussions about an issue that often tops the agenda for many of us as we age, and we're very honored to present them here. At this time, I want to thank our partners, all of whom have been with us from the beginning of these gatherings and are listed. If they can, is that posted so that everyone can see as the main slide?
Yes.
Good. So take a look at that list, and we are proud for partners. And of course, for those of you who are institutions and you're not a partner yet, we look forward afterwards for you to contact Stuart or me and join this initiative. Next, two requests. Please make sure you're muted. You all know this. We are now experts at webinars. Everything will work better for all of us that way. And second, if you have questions as we proceed, please put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to try to get to them. Always to remind you, you can contact our speakers at any time, independent of this session. Look, we are living now through difficult and in many ways tragic times. Perhaps none of us were prepared at this stage in our lives, in this stage of the Jewish people, that these are the types of things we would be dealing with. We're all affected by what we are seeing and hearing and reading in Israel, also Jewish life here in the United States, political life here in the United States, and really all around the world. Why we pray and we hope for a healing and lasting peace. We also continue the work of strengthening Jewish life. That can't, in a sense, take second place anymore, of working together to make things better for all of us, for older people, for the generations to come, for all Americans, and really for humanity. In that spirit, I'm pleased to now introduce my really wonderful colleague and the force behind so much of what is the Active Aging Network, and he will introduce our featured speakers. Thanks again to the speakers, to all of you here. We'll see you, of course, we hope, for our next convening. And please, again, if you have any questions as this proceeds, don't worry about typing in. I'll be taking note of them and passing them on to our speakers. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you, David, and welcome, everyone. My name's Stuart Himmelfarb, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's discussion entitled Taking Control of End of Life Jewishly, a communal conversation. Some of you may recall that our previous session with Tamar Prager dealt with decluttering. And today's session is actually a really appropriate follow-up to that, because in both cases, it has to do with us taking control of our lives, our plans, and our things. And while we declutter our closets, we also need to think about ways that we prepare for what is inevitable, and that is end of life planning, and that we do it in a positive way and we do it collaboratively. Our speakers today are leading the way in that endeavor. And so let me first introduce them to you, and then we'll begin our conversation. Lindsay Bressman is the board chair for the SHOMER Collective. She works as a chaplain at Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, where she supports individuals and families navigating chronic disease, terminal illness, end of life, and grief. She serves on the Chesed Committee at Kane Street Synagogue, supporting congregants facing personal hardship. Prior to chaplaincy, Lindsay worked in social work and hospital administration for New York Presbyterian, NYU, and Stanford Medical Center. She has an MSW degree from Columbia University, an MPH in healthcare management from UCLA School of Public Health, and she has studied Jewish tradition, wisdom, and ritual at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Pardes Institute, and the Melton School. Lindsay is joined by Rabbi Melanie Levav, who's the executive director of the SHOMER Collective. Melanie is passionate about helping to improve end-of-life care and conversations, and brings this commitment to the SHOMER Collective as its executive director. Prior to the SHOMER Collective, Rabbi Levav served as director of PJ Library in New York, a program of the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. She has held positions at the Marx Jewish Community House of Bensonhurst, the Mandel Center for Jewish Education at the JCC Association, one of our partners, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, and UJA Federation of New York. An alumna of the Wexner Graduate Fellowship, Rabbi Levav was ordained as a rabbi by the Jewish Theological Seminary. She is certified as a chaplain by Neshama, the National Association of Jewish Chaplains, and received her graduate degree in social work from Columbia University. So we have a distinguished group of speakers with us today, and let's get right into the discussion. Let's start right at the beginning, Melanie, and let me ask you how SHOMER Collective started and why. And when you're doing that, and then Lindsay can follow, talk a little bit about your path and how you got involved in these issues. What led you to work in this area?
Great. Thank you so much, first of all, for having us. It's really an honor to be partnering with you throughout all of your convenings and to be speaking with you today. So a little bit of background. SHOMER Collective was founded a little over 5 years ago by 5 friends who had had the experience of someone close to them dying, and they didn't know what to do or where to turn Jewishly. They knew, though, that they were missing something big, because Jewish wisdom and practice has a lot to offer us about death and dying. And I was working in Jewish community organizations, as you said in my bio, and I noticed a pattern of families. I was working in a JCC, families who are winding up in crisis around end of life because we aren't talking about or planning for it sufficiently. At the same time, I was having this noticing professionally. Personally, I became a primary caregiver for my mother-in-law, a Holocaust survivor, where I learned about things like hospice and chaplains for the first time in my life on the job as a caregiver. And I got curious, who were these people who got to come in and support strangers, literally, in one of the most intimate and profound moments in life? So that led me back to school. I pivoted my career about 15 years ago to focus on end-of-life Jewishly. I became a second career rabbi, board-certified chaplain, end-of-life doula, to add to my earlier social work training. And one of our founders gave us the name Shomer, which means guard in modern Hebrew, and is the person who sits with the deceased from death until burial, as we don't leave our dead unattended. Shomer's work is designed to provide that accompaniment to support you in the form of accessible Jewish wisdom and practical help on your journey in life, confronting mortality in order to live a life of greater meaning and connection.
Great. And Lindsay, tell us about your path getting
Yeah.
involved with it.
It's not that dissimilar, but I just want to reiterate, thank you, David and Stuart, for this opportunity. So my father, who retired a few years ago, was a physician for 50 years. And I grew up very comfortable in hospitals and healthcare settings. Spent most of my career in hospitals, first as a social worker. I've done work in policy reform and as a clinic director. But it was the rabbi chaplain at my dad's hospital, Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles. His name was Rabbi Levi Meir, that introduced me really to this intersection of physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. And a number of years ago, I decided that with all the experience I've done in healthcare, sort of at the system level, I wanted to go back to the one-to-one, the patient care, and decided to go into chaplaincy, where I've really seen that intersection, that convergence. And particularly, patients whenever there's, I would say people whenever they're sick, whether that's, an acute illness or, something graver, and being in the hospital, mortality comes into focus in a whole new way, and questions of purpose, life's meaning, and really the divine, this idea of, what is God, becomes very present. A colleague of mine calls it the thin moments between reality and the sacred. And while this is true of all illness, I've really seen this in end of life. So whether that's theoretical or actual, you really see the sort of preciousness that is the spiritual and the physical and the mental. And Judaism offers remarkable value in this holy moment. And as I was getting onto my chaplain track, I was introduced to Shomer and to Rabbi Melanie. And when I understood that Shomer's goal was really to help as many people as possible find the beauty of that spiritual grounding, particularly from Jewish tradition and wisdom, and what it can provide in times, of dying and death, I knew I had to get involved.
Great. Let's just to be explicit, I just would ask you to lay out the mission and the organizational values of SHOMER Collective. You've described how you both got into it. How would you describe your mission in a handful of sentences and your kind of overall organizational values?
Sure, I'll take that. So our mission is to leverage Jewish wisdom, to make it accessible, to transform communal culture around death and dying, to normalize talking about it, fostering a proactive planning like we're talking about today, and robust support systems for end-of-life moments like you can do in your professional settings. We envision a world where end-of-life matters are spoken about openly, thoughtfully, and frequently, creating opportunities to engage with Jewish wisdom and values and practice around end-of-life. Our values, we are Jewishly grounded. We elevate Jewish tradition and practice. Our work is rooted in Jewish wisdom and tradition to support those who seek to benefit from Jewish insight on death and dying, right? We see a question in the chat about it already. We're pluralistic and inclusive. We seek to serve Jews from all backgrounds and cultures and all degrees of knowledge. All of our offerings are designed to be accessible no matter what your background, including staff of Jewish organizations who may not themselves be Jewish. And lastly, we're collaborative. We want to foster a sense of connection, especially for those who don't have Jewish communities of their own. We accomplish this by partnering with organizations like yours within and outside of the Jewish community, joining together to reach those who seek to engage with Jewish wisdom around end of life.
So I want to ask a question about something that actually came up in a group that I'm involved in, which is at Lab Shul here in New York, a group of people going through our later in life experiences together in a group called Generate. And we're all really in sync with each other. We've been together 6 or 7 years through COVID. And the one issue that we didn't reach consensus on, well, now it's politics also, but that's a different discussion. That's in the next seminar. The other thing had to do with end-of-life planning. And there were some in our group who wanted to explore it and understand it better. And there were others who said, I'm not ready for that conversation. So there seems to be kind of a universal hesitation, maybe not quite universal, but close, semi-universal, to discussing end-of-life issues. How do you overcome that hesitation in your work and in your approach to this?
So I was thinking about this recently because I was given a poll by a colleague of ours. What are the reasons why you don't do end of life or are resistant to do end of life planning? So I would say the human instinct is to live. It's to our animalistic side is to avoid danger, to avoid death, and to find ways of surviving. And this is especially true in Judaism. We uphold life over everything else. We know that we have permission to break commandments for the purposes of saving someone's life, pikuach nefesh. So life is first and foremost. And to many people, death is the opposite of life. So, why would you want to talk about that? I also think Jews are quite superstitious. I would say this is probably true in other cultures, but I certainly know this for Judaism. I myself will say, chas v'chalila, poo, these sort of things to avoid or steer away the evil spirits. And there's a sense of, fear of drawing death and harm merely by saying the bad thing out loud. So that does leave us, Melanie and I, but also, the greater world of a challenge for discussing death and dying, and particularly the Jewish way. So I would say there are two things that we try to do. One is personal stories. There isn't a single person in the world who hasn't had an experience with death. A grandparent, a pet, a teacher, and then certainly a parent, maybe a child, a sibling, a spouse. And so in our meetings with individuals and communities, we invite people to share, what was that like? Where did you find meaning? What was difficult? What was helpful? And what would you have wanted differently? And what would you want differently in the future? When people start to reflect and think about those personal experiences, they realize the importance of, confronting this universal reality that our time is finite. And then the second thing is that, we believe that our mission is, Jewish tradition is extremely helpful in navigating really all milestones, but particularly this one. And for many people, ritual is, while required, is also very comforting and familiar and provides a valued infrastructure, even if it's exhausting. And then there are people that maybe didn't grow up with these traditions, who maybe find the practices and the concepts, foreign or exclusive. And with both of these groups, our strategy is to engage them with information and with knowledge, and to have, expert speakers and facilitated conversations that are rooted in just learning. And I will just give an example. We had a talk last week on medical assistance in dying, which is sometimes referred to as MAID, which is now legal in 14 states in the U.S. and in Canada. It's legal throughout the country. SHOMER doesn't take an official stance, but we want to create a space where people can learn. And we want to understand what are the religious implications. What does halacha say? So we brought in an expert to discuss that. What are the ethical implications? What are the personal matters? So with everything, we're both trying to understand, personally, what is your experience, and also let's learn, and hoping that both of those will encourage people to engage in these conversations that are not easy or fun.
If I can just add something to that,
Sure.
we've lost the Jewish wisdom of talking about death and dying. If you think about the things you learned if you grew up in a Jewish family, rituals, lighting candles on Shabbat or Hanukkah, for example, these are things that have been taught to us. We have not been taught how to talk about it. 3 or 4 generations ago, maybe, our families were experiencing death still in the home and in the community. And the texts and stories of our tradition have a ton to offer about that reality because people were more familiar generations ago with the experience of dying. Yet the way we live now in this country, that wisdom has been lost to us, with the majority of Americans dying in hospitals or long-term care facilities. We don't often live in close proximity to our families of origin. The majority of American Jews aren't affiliated with synagogues. So Shomer's work normalizing talking about death early and often is really to bring that wisdom of our own people back into our lives, to overcome the hesitation because we weren't taught how to do it.
Well, I trust everybody has now had the experience that I've had from dealing with Shomer Collective, which is that they are remarkable in how they articulate these issues and make them accessible to us. And we now want to turn toward one of the goals of our work in active aging, which is to encourage new program ideas and to encourage individuals and groups to explore programs that are relevant to us at this stage in our lives. And clearly, I think we've made the case how relevant this discussion is. So let me now turn it over to Melanie and Lindsay to walk us through some of the key programs and initiatives of Shomer Collective. Let us know which ones are geared to professionals, which ones are geared to individuals, workshops, the role of Shiva, and so on, so that we can all get a sense of your portfolio. And obviously later on, we're going to explore how we can, as people involved in active aging, how we can avail ourselves of these services. Floor is yours.
Well, thanks. We'll put a link in the chat to the things that I'm going to talk about. I'll name a number of our signature programs, and then I'll put up briefly a slide so you can see some of it visually. I just want to stress, though, we recognize that even those of us who are professionals who come to this work wanting some skills and tools and language to use in the communities we serve, we're also individuals. And so we find that when you show up as a professional, you're also coming with your own questions and challenges in your own life. So I just want to acknowledge that for those of you who may be new to our work. When we invite you in as a professional, we recognize that you're showing up as you, the personal identity you carry as well. So first and foremost, we run a convening every year. We seek to gather professionals who work at the intersection of Jewish life and end of life. We're getting about 400 people who show up for half a day online, pick and choose the things that are of interest to you. It's an opportunity like today to interact with other people who want to be doing this work, who want to have conversations. And a lot of new connections are born in our annual convening. Our signature program for advanced care planning, for identifying who is going to be my healthcare proxy and what are my wishes that I'm going to put in a living will document, is called What Matters, Caring Conversations About End of Life. It started at the Marlene Meyerson JCC in Manhattan and came under our umbrella a few years ago in order to bring that to a larger audience beyond New York. We run every quarter an open to the public free What Matters program. You see the link in the chat. You can sign up for the next conversation. We also come and do these workshops in communities, training your staff in your community organization, how to have these conversations with your clients, with your constituents. Similarly, Death Over Dinner Jewish Edition, a program that has been run by our partners at Reboot, is a thing that we offer regularly, free and open to anyone online, a 90-minute conversation where you break up into a small group and you look at a piece of Jewish wisdom, an idea, and then have a conversation about what you are thinking about as it applies to you. Who am I and how do I want to live? We also offer training for professionals to learn how to facilitate those conversations. And that training is really for anyone. Death Over Dinner, the model of this conversation, which can be done online or in person, is meant to be a peer conversation. So anyone can be trained as a facilitator, and we welcome volunteer facilitators who have trained with us to help us lead small groups in our programs. And our newest initiative is called Shiva Circle. We offer access to training both for individuals and for professionals. I'm sure my colleague Samantha Zellman is going to put the link in the chat to sign up if you want to learn more or join us. And Shiva Circle is a new initiative designed to bring the beauty of the Shiva ritual back into our conversations and our practice, helping to create circles of support for people at the height of their grief, Jewishly. So just to show you a little bit about what I'm talking about, I am going to put up a quick slide. But Lindsay, I wonder if there's anything else you want to highlight while I'm doing that.
Yeah. So in social work, you think of people as living in these concentric circles, and sort of what are the different institutions that we all live within. And at Shomer, we think about this ecosystem of dying and death, which can be quite fragmented. So, you have your personal physician, your specialty doctors, your financial planner, your lawyer, maybe an accountant. There's the hospital experience, perhaps the nursing facility or retirement community, home care, the funeral home, the shul, your local community, and there's this disjointed communication often. And so as Melanie pointed out, we're trying to stitch together connections and link organizations to both for professionals and individuals, to have them speak to each other. And I just wanted to give two quick examples. My parents have been amazing about having these conversations. They worked in healthcare for a long time, so they're a little bit more comfortable than the average person. And we were having a conversation, and I had asked about cemetery plot, because I have a long list, if anyone wants a sort of checklist for adult children to discuss with their parents. And my mom said, "Oh, well, we purchased those through our synagogue," which I thought was so intuitive and so brilliant that a synagogue would have that opportunity in a very low stakes way. All congregants who want to purchase a plot that's in our area, come sign up. I will say my current shul, my synagogue, does not do this. We've started to talk about it, but we haven't yet. And so there are a lot of places that maybe there are these connections that of overlap and that haven't been done yet. And then also people who are not involved with the synagogue. What are other places where we could make those connections and those prompts to think about end-of-life planning? And another example that's a little less intuitive, one of the programs that Shomer has offered is an educator's fellowship. So for teachers to learn more about the traditions and rituals. And one of the teachers at my children's day school, who teaches second and third grade, did the fellowship. And then a young boy in second grade's mother passed away. And she realized that the kids probably had a lot of questions. She brought them together. She had done this training, so she felt comfortable doing it. And the kids could not stop talking. Obviously they hear about death. They have thoughts on it. She said they could have talked for hours. But because she was sort of the resident expert at the school, she was able to lead that conversation.
Melanie, do you want to bring your slide up again?
Oh, sure.
And then we'll move on to the next couple of questions.
Yes, this just gives you a visual of the programs that we have mentioned, and we're putting the links in the chat so folks can connect with them. I'll elevate one more, the Jewish end-of-life doulas. Not as many people have heard about this phenomenon, but it's growing in this country, of paraprofessionals who have trained to support individuals and families at bedside. That's what the doula role is. You may be more familiar with the doula role around birth and postpartum support from doulas. And we convene a group of Jewish end of life doulas for regular professional development, for networking. We also have a directory on our website where end of life doulas who are Jewish can list themselves so that you can find them. You can also reach out to us for more help finding a doula in your own community.
Great. So a couple of I must tell everybody, this has been the most active chat from all of our convenings, and we will do our best to get to all the questions, but we will also capture them and share them with Melanie and Lindsay so that they can respond to you directly with them, or we can share it in other ways. So hang in there and please keep adding the questions to it. I think that's a sign of how resonant this topic is. I want to ask a specific aspect of your programming that David and I have long been concerned with, the intergenerational aspects of aging and programs for us. How would you describe the kind of intergenerational component of the work you do?
Yes, I'm happy to take that. I did note somebody had asked, or a few people had asked for the list, and we will make sure to get that to you. And this sort of speaks to this question a bit. I have been leading focus groups with people in what I call sort of my cohort. So let's say 35 to 55, and thinking about how do we have conversations with our parents. These are not easy conversations to have, but they're really rooted in an idea of we want our parents to feel, and if you are at the older end, for you to feel heard and your preferences to be honored, whatever that may be, not just end of life, but sort of through the aging process. This is something that we see as fostering honest relationships, security for both generations, and being able to talk about it in a way that's not chaos driven. So both Melanie and I work a lot in end of life. I work in hospitals. She does more in the community, and it's often a time of chaos and struggle and pain. And actually, we want people to focus on the emotional side, and we believe Judaism provides so much for the emotional side and the spiritual side, but we want all the technical pieces sort of put in place. So there's a book that I've encouraged a lot of my friends to buy. It's called Peace of Mind Planner. I can drop it in the link in a moment. And this is actually this idea is rooted in a reference in Bereshit, in Genesis, which is Jacob's death and burial. It's chapter 49, verse 29. And Jacob actually calls his children to his bed. And he says, I'm soon to join my people. And I want to be buried with my ancestors in the cave that's in the field up front. He gives very specific directions of where he wants to be buried. And there's something really amazing to us that it is in the beginning, this biblical direction of communication between one generation to another. And beyond the end of life specifics is that Judaism endures because of Lador Vador, that rituals, that meaning, that purpose, that values are passed down. So just like you would pass down recipes, or just like you would pass down heirlooms, or stories of, grandparents migrating or struggling through the Holocaust. There's also the passing on of meaning, and what do you want the next generation, to hold on to? So actually, I think Melanie had referenced ethical wills. So that's sort of what are the values you want the next generation. And so, this keeps coming back to the idea of normalizing conversations long before it's a time of stress. And, I say to my friends, tell your parents, I know you're not dying. We're not having this conversation because you're dying. We're having this conversation because I'm an adult and you're an adult. And I want to understand, what are you hoping for this next chapter?
Great. I was going to ask you about connecting end-of-life planning and programs to an active aging agenda. You can address it if you want, but it seems to me very clear, because to be involved in active aging means to take control of your life, to summon all the resources to make your life full and meaningful, and to do so in an intergenerational setting. That's how David and I organized this initiative. It's pretty clear to me that if I ask the question, it's a layup for you all, because it's so clear how your work ties into that kind of empowerment that we look for at this stage in life. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there is one thing that I wanted to mention, which is invest in community. So whether that's your synagogue or any sort of place of worship, if that's a book club, friends that you've had for a long time, think about what it means to show up for other people, and how are you doing that today? Are you going to shivas? Are you going to joyous occasions? Are you having lunch dates and coffees? Because when you invest in your community, it gives you a sense of comfort that you're, setting yourself up for support, which you will need in some capacity. And it's a win-win, because when you're social, endless research has shown, when you're in community, when you're social, it keeps you younger and healthier. So I would say invest in your community in whatever that looks like to you. That's the best way to use the period of active aging with an eye on sort of what's to come.
Great. Last question before we turn to the Q&A. What's the first thing you would suggest interested individuals and groups do now after hearing about the work of SHOMER Collective?
Sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the chat. We'll put it again in the chat. Give us your name and your email address so that we can share with you all of our upcoming programs. And I've put other links in the chat to some recordings of past programs. And we will look forward to being connected with you going forward.
Great. That's terrific. All right. Don, let's bring up Rabbi Geller. We'll start off the Q&A with a question or a comment from our colleague, Laura Geller. Bear with us for a second.
Hi.
There we are. Hi, Laura.
I actually posted this in the chat. Did it come into the chat as well?
It might have, but go ahead.
Some of you might know, because a colleague of mine and I wrote a book called Moments That Matter, Marking Transition in Midlife and Beyond, where we offer new rituals for the stage of life, from midlife to end of life, but before end of life. And these are rituals as opposed to just conversations about important moments. So my question for you is, how do you use the word ritual a lot in your talks, but ritual is different from conversations. There are wonderful rituals that we have in Jewish tradition after somebody dies. Shiva, Shloshim, Yortzeit candles, all kinds of things connected to that. But what actually might be a ritual that someone could do in order to acknowledge this stage of life. So in this book, we created a ritual called Embracing the Joy of Finitude. And it actually outlines what could happen if you called people together at a moment when you're beginning to think about this. What would be the actual ritual that is different from simply a conversation, as important as those conversations are, that but different from a conversation. So the real question is, what are those rituals? What might you think a ritual would be? And how does ritual differ from learning about end-of-life choices?
Sure. I'm going to expect that Lindsay, who works at bedside as a chaplain, is going to have something to add to this. But I'll say two things come to mind. And I imagine, Rabbi Geller, reading your book, we can get a little bit more insight on the difference between ritual and just having the conversation. But I could imagine having a conversation that's an advanced care planning conversation. Mom, who do you want to make decisions in the event you can't make decisions for yourself? Turning that from merely a conversation into a ritual that perhaps once we've completed the advance directive document, we create a ritual together that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and an action that's embodied the conversation that we've had. Now that we have completed this, we might do something together. Maybe it is that we will share a copy of that with all of the relatives by convening them all around the kitchen table, just as we would around a holiday meal, and ritualize that gathering, or to do it over Zoom, right? Or to use the other indicators of ritual that we have in our lives, especially modern interpretations, like the way we use the mikveh now, not just for activities of what is commonly called family purity, but also to mark a change in status. And there's an opportunity to use that kind of ritual, dipping in a body of water, to mark a change in status. I wrote an article, I'll put the link in the chat, about how we can talk with our 18-year-olds before they go off to college about what they want. Any adult in this country should have an advanced care plan. And if your kid is going to school in Michigan for 9 months of the year, right, they're spending more time there than they are in Los Angeles. And so what does it look like to create a ritual with them to complete the first advanced care planning document that they've done? And the other piece that I think lends itself well to rituals is an ethical will. When a parent writes a letter indicating their values that they want to pass on to future generations, and the transmission of that value can be ritualized, right? I am giving you this letter to my children, is, I think, an action that deserves ritual and not just communication. Lindsay, something to add?
Yeah. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's a rabbi. He's young. He just got married, and he's catering to a audience of 20s and 30s. And we had this conversation that what are the two sort of most known things about Jewish ritual, you know, among the world, and it's the chuppah and the shiva. And even just speaking to what you were saying, David, I've spent some time studying how Israelis have coped with the war, and it regardless of observance, even among, you know, stellar, secular, perhaps atheist Israelis, they always have Shiva, and you always go to Shiva. And it's this very central ritual tradition that isn't just, it's not just for the, you know, small little group. It's a community practice. And in my synagogue, Kane Street, I'm on the Chesed committee. And our charge is to go to as many shivas as you can, particularly when you don't know the person at all. And so I've started going, and it's given me a sense of who's in my community. And then it sort of builds these relationships. And how do we make Shiva a community activity in a way that there's a sense of we all have obligation to it, And, perhaps at one point we're going to need it, but really I'm a community member. And so I attend. And, this is something of people of all generations or all ages that I think they should prioritize as a ritual. And I will say I have a small ritual that I've started, which is when a friend loses a parent or a sibling, I always ask, what is an organization or a cause that was important to your parent or your family member, particularly when I didn't know them, and that I make a small donation to, could be $18, whatever it is, to that organization. It's sort of my way of saying, I see you, I recognize that that you're going through this. I didn't know your family member, but this is a moment in time. So I think, to me, the universal Jewish ritual of how we mark death and grief can actually be a jumping off point for Jewish engagement.
So just a quick response. I think it is, Rabbi Levav, I really appreciate your translating all that into something that happens before we're talking about Shiva. And much of what you suggest is, in fact, part of the ritual in the book. And I look forward to working with you as we come up with together rituals for, for the embracing the joy of finitude. I think it's
Beautiful.
an important piece of this process. So
Thank you.
We only have a few more minutes. When we're talking about programs in this way, and some of these programs are intensely personal, within the family, individuals doing them as a group that then learns together and then goes out and does it individually in their families, is a way that it builds a more communal, shared feeling. So these things are really terrific potential programs in your organizations and synagogues. I'm going to get to a bunch of the questions, and I hope we can go quickly now. First question, what does Jewish tradition say about donating one's body for research or donating body parts to those who need transplants?
I'll take it briefly. There are traditional opinions that would say it is not allowed, and a traditional opinion in line with the most traditional views of Jewish law, because it is our practice to bury our dead in the ground. From dust we come, and to dust we shall return. That said, with the trend of more people making different choices, we want to make sure that in your work as a professional and as individuals, you may still avail yourselves of Jewish rituals. You can still have a Jewish funeral, a memorial service, a burial of cremated remains, even if one chooses things outside of the norm. So Judaism isn't all or nothing when it comes to these practices.
Good. I'm going to read this question. I think I get it. The questioner says, I have noticed visual cemeteries in Europe and also in America that one can, quote, visit the graves of family members. Is this just another way to avoid in-person engagement? Yes, awkward, but you understand, in-person engagement.
I'll say it's about accessibility. There's a website called findagrave.com. And I found a relative's a picture of his headstone, who I didn't even know existed. This was a relative who found me through 23andMe. I'm sure some of you have heard these kinds of wacky stories, right? So I think when we can find things online, a visual cemetery, make a visit, it may be cost prohibitive. I may not have the ability to travel to California where he lived and died. I live in New York City. But being able to see it online brings that image back into my family conversations and the stories I can share with my children, even when we can't visit that cemetery.
So it works. It can work. In discussions with an adult child about end-of-life issues, she asked for resources to discuss or explain Jewish views of what happens after death. Any classes, books, films, or NYC resources you can recommend? Probably doesn't have to just be New York.
Sure. I put a link in the chat to respond to that question with recordings, with resources from Shomer Collective's website. We have an afterlife section with a few articles that we've curated, but I'll also elevate the teacher in our generation is Simcha Raphael in Philadelphia, has written the books, Jewish Views of the Afterlife. His work is accessible online. We have a recording of a 3-session program we did with him, Jewish Views of the Afterlife. And he also teaches on the regular, going around to synagogues and JCCs. So we'll put a link in the chat so that you can access his wisdom as well.
Great. One last comment. This is an interesting topic for the next time. Great idea to encourage elders and everyone to be heard and honored. How does this relate to the increasingly common phenomenon of adult children estranging themselves from their parents? Can you address this situation? They say it perhaps in a future program, but have you run across how to have your programs in family settings where there's significant tension?
You know, it's a hard thing, and I acknowledge that in the chat also. Lindsay, Rabbi Geller, I invite you, if you have something to add to this, please. I'll say this, our friends at the Jewish Grandparent Network have addressed this head on. They have done some programming, and I would recommend you check their website out, jewishgrandparentnetwork.org, on the issue of estrangement between adult children and parents. I would also add that when we talk about sharing with you what my wishes are, it's a gift to the next generation. So if there are ways that you're looking to re-engage from one generation to the other, just as you might give a monetary gift or a physical gift, sharing my wishes with you, sharing my will, my advanced care planning documents is a gift, so that the burden of caring for me after my lifetime isn't left on you without, a hint as to what I wanted.
It seems like the ethic here is don't leave things unsaid and address them.
Certainly helpful.
Actually, we are just about out of time. As I said earlier, this was one of the most active chats we've seen. We haven't been able to get to everything, but we will go through every comment and address as best we can. I want to thank Rabbi Melanie Levav and Lindsay Bressman. This was really productive and really a terrific session. And it, as David said at the beginning, helped achieve a really key objective of ours at the Active Aging Network, which is to encourage the exploration of key issues, relevant challenges that people face as they go through this life stage. So we thank you so much for your time and your thoughts on this. We encourage everybody to visit our site, activeagingnetwork.org. There are resources available. We will add some new resources because Shomer Collective has so many great things. And we encourage you to also visit the registration form. We maintain a list, a directory of people interested in active aging, and it's active age from all aspects of it. And you can search by institutional group or by individual name and so on. And if you're thinking about embarking on an active aging program, it's a great way for you to find colleagues who may have tried what you're thinking about, may be able to identify some potholes that you can avoid. But most of all, we want to build a community around these issues. So that's why we've developed a list of our partners. That's why we've encouraged other organizations to become partners with us and to recognize the need for us to reach out to what is about 90% of the Jewish adults in this cohort who are looking for information and looking for challenges and looking for engagement. We can do it, or as David said in his research many years ago, they could go elsewhere. So we hope that doesn't occur.
Stuart,
With that,
can I just add? I'm not sure if it was clear. Not only that you should sign up to the website, but a number of you in your chats listed programs that you run. Part of our goal is to create a conversation that isn't through us. We're not providers. We're exactly hoping to be a network. So if you would put in a program, chances are somebody will contact you and say, I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to see that. Can you help me? And we create a network that way. So please, those of you who put in, let's not let it be wasted that you put in a program you've developed, but please post that once you sign on to the website and become part of a vital network that deals with active aging.
With that, let me just thank again our speakers, Lindsay Bressman and Rabbi Melanie Levov. I also want to thank our partners at the Wexler Center for Modern Aging. That's Ariane Pelletier and Don Dubois, who is our tech supporter, and also the Jewish Federations of North America, who provided support in registration. That's Phoebe Chapman. And with that, we look forward to seeing you at our next convening. We will no doubt be in touch with you by email persistently. So thank you again. Let's echo David's comment earlier, hoping for peace as soon as possible. Thanks.